Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello. I'm Marshall Goldsmith, and so happy to be here today on LinkedIn Live. This is sponsored by my wonderful friends at Thinkers 50, our partners in this endeavor. And Methods, a wonderful organization, produces online learning opportunities, which is totally appropriate in today's environment. I am going to briefly introduce myself, and then we're going to get on to talk to my wonderful guest today, who's a very special human being. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Marshall. I'm from a small town called Valley Station, Kentucky. I went to school in Indiana. I got a PhD at UCLA. I was a college professor and dean when I was very young. And then for the last 42 years, I've done three things. I give talks or teach classes. I've traveled all around the world. And then I've coached executives. I've been the coach of CEOs of Ford and Pfizer and Glaxo and the World Bank, the Mayo Clinic, and all kinds of special people. And then I write books and articles. So I've written or edited 41 books and 3 New York Times bestsellers. So had a very lucky life, very happy. And then I went to a program called Design the Life You Love. And the woman said, who are your heroes? And my heroes were kind and generous people who were really nice teachers. And she said, you should be like them. I decided to adopt 15 people, teach them all I know for free. And the only price is when they get old, they need to do the same thing. Well, I made a little video and put it here on LinkedIn, and I thought maybe 100 people would apply and I'd adopt 15. Well, it turned out over 18,000 people have applied, and I've now adopted, 200 or so, and it's just been wonderful. And the group is called 100. If you put in the number 100 space coaches and do a Google search, you'll see who they are. Just a group of amazing human beings, and one of them is with us today. I'd like to introduce my wonderful friend I've known for not quite 20 years, but almost 20 years, Mark Tercek. Mark was a partner for many years at Goldman Sachs and had very many jobs in Goldman Sachs, including leading Pine Street, which is kind of their training and development effort. And then many years ago, I had the privilege of meeting Mark, and we've had a great relationship ever since. I've learned so much from him. And then he left Goldman Sachs for 11 years to be the CEO of the Nature Conservancy, one of the most important environmental jobs in the world. And, I'm just so proud of him. He's done so many good things for the world, and also just a good human being, as well as a very, very smart guy. So Mark, why don't you tell the group a little bit about yourself, and also share the funny story about how we got to meet.
Okay, Marshall, first, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to do this with you. For everybody listening, Marshall is a dear friend of mine, and at a couple of really important points in my life was a great advisor to me. I met Marshall when I was working at Goldman Sachs. I read the profile of him in the New Yorker. It was a great story. And something about that article just intrigued me. And although it wasn't the kind of thing I did normally, I reached out to Marshall and somehow found him, and he finally came to visit me at Goldman Sachs. And even in our first conversation, he began to, I didn't really ask him to do this, but he began to coach me and give me advice on how to listen better and things like that. And we had a great friendship since then. Marshall's helped me a lot, and he really helped me a lot. Marshall just noted I left Goldman Sachs to join the Nature Conservancy. It might seem like a natural and easy thing to do, but it took me years, honestly, to build up the courage to leave my position at Goldman Sachs. It was a comfortable job. At the time, it was a very prestigious job. I was doing well there. I was pretty good at it. And I had this idea that I wanted to go into the environmental world and try to make the world a better place. A good idea. And I was really getting frustrated with myself because I wasn't acting on that good idea. So one day I was speaking with Marshall by phone. He said, come out and see me. So I went to visit Marshall in San Diego. We took a walk in his neighborhood, and he was pressing me. Marshall was pressing me. Why don't you just get on with this plan? And at one point I said something kind of lame, like, I'm worried what people will think of me. And he said, with a little bit of anger, whose life are you leading anyway? Yours or everybody else's? And he shook me up. His question was such a good one. And I went back to Goldman Sachs, and that's when I really just sort of got on with it. And I'm so grateful because I subsequently had this, and I continue to have this really rewarding experience in the environmental field. But really, would I have done it without Marshall pushing me? I'm not so sure. So Marshall, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, you had 11 years of leading the Nature Conservancy, one of the most important environmental organizations in the world. What do you want to share for some of your learnings from that 11-year experience?
Yeah, really, I had a great experience at the Nature Conservancy in every respect. It was a hard job. I worked hard. There were many challenges, but it was hugely positive for me. And I was so grateful
Mhm.
and fortunate to work with the wonderful team of full-time employees at TNC and all their supporters. One of my jobs, I was the CEO. So one of my duties was to be attentive and to spend time with volunteers and donors to the Nature Conservancy, of course. And many of the most important supporters of the Nature Conservancy were more elderly people, people in their 80s, even their late 80s. And so my wife, Amy, and I, we would often go to events where, TNC events and spend time with all these people. They were mostly all great people. But on our way home, Amy and I would often remark to one another that the people who seemed to us to be most engaged, most energetic, most youthful were these are older people, late 80s. So it really caught my attention, and I wanted to better understand how they did that. They seemed so happy. They seemed to be living such fulfilling lives. So many of them became good friends of mine. And basically, what I concluded is these people figured out the secret to a happy and fulfilling life. And this is what they decided to do. And they did this quite, with a plan. They didn't stumble into it. In this case, they decided to devote a lot of their energy to the environmental cause. They really gave it their all. They worked hard. They stayed informed. They even were careful to stay in shape so they'd have energy. And as a result of all that, they were engaged with lots of people. They were thinking less about themselves and more about others and how to make the world a better place. And I think, voila,
Hmm.
they are happy, fulfilled people, and they're my heroes. And my biggest takeaway from my time at TNC was, I want to be like that. I want to be one of these people who, so long as I get to live on this life, think more about others, engage in important causes, and hopefully I can achieve that same kind of fulfillment.
Hey, Mark, you've been to a couple of programs I've done with transitioning typically corporate CEOs, and the topic is what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And you were at the first one I did, I believe, with Alan Mulally was there, who went on to be the
Yes.
CEO of Ford, and there was a lot of it. It was a lot of very deep discussion. And one of the people there was Frances Hesselbein, who we both love, of course, former CEO of the Girl Scouts. And I remember there was a little existential whining going on about poor me and I don't know what I'm going to do and all that crap. And Francis finally got sick of it and said, well, maybe we should all consider helping others for a little while and quit whining about ourselves. Everyone in this room has more blessings than you can count. So why don't we drop this whining crap and just go out and help other people? She didn't say it in those terms, but that was pretty much it. You were there. What are some of the reflections you've had on those couple of sessions you did with me about listening to people reflect on the topic? What are you going to do now?
Yeah, the sessions were really helpful. So, I mean, this stuff sounds like it would be easy to do.
Right,
Especially if you've had some, commercial career success. How hard would it
right,
be to just go and shift gears and try to make the world better,
right.
help others? But it's not quite as easy as it looks. And I've noticed, well, in my time at TNC and even today, lots of people ask me, "Hey, how can I make that kind of transition?" The sessions we
Right.
did, Marshall, were really helpful because folks candidly talked about what's hard and easy. I think some of the key things to keep in mind if you're considering that kind of transition is first to be very, very humble. Um,
Hmm.
this is a hard thing to do for some successful people. They're used to giving orders and telling people what to do. I've made that mistake a lot. But in making these kinds of transitions, if you're going from one area to another, you'll be the new person. And even if you bring a lot of
Right.
skill and expertise and experience, which you can, there'll be a lot you don't know. It's a new culture, new community, etc. So being humble, listening, these are really important. The other thing that I would advise is it's a little bit hard to judge from the outside where you will or won't fit in well. So before you make a
Right.
big leap, a dramatic change, take some small steps. So, for example, in my case, before I joined the Nature Conservancy, when I was at Goldman Sachs, I got engaged with a few environmental organizations, joined boards, rolled up my sleeves, and worked on some projects. And that was really helpful because it helped me get prepared for the bigger transition, but it also helped me figure out whether or not that was likely to be a good fit for me.
That's good. That's good. You know, a participant in one of our programs, I don't know if you met him before, is Mike Duke. Mike was the CEO of Walmart, and he was
Yeah.
retiring. He went to our program. He had a great story. He said, I had this little joke I told when I was the CEO of Walmart. He said, such a funny joke. It was a clean joke. It didn't offend anyone. And he said, I love my little joke. And he said, and I always tell this joke, and everyone loved it. And then he said, I retired, and I told a little joke, and he said, nobody laughed. And he thought, well, they must be grumpy. So he said, I'm another group. I tell a little joke again. He said, nobody laughed. Finally, my wife came to me. She goes, Mike, you idiot. You idiot. Did you actually think that stupid joke was funny? Well, when he was a CEO of Walmart, that joke was hilarious. But now, not so funny. Mark, on a more personal note, now you're used to being a CEO for a lot of years there, 11 years. I imagine your jokes were moderately funny during that 11-year period. But now you're home with the wife and the family and stuff. And let me ask you a question. What has happened to the hilarity of your jokes? Have they maintained their high level or perhaps declined a little bit?
I still think my jokes are very good, Marshall, but I would acknowledge they don't seem to get the same laughter that they used to. It's a good, your Mike Duke anecdote is a good one. Again, if you've got a job like that I have two observations. First of all, when I look back, when I was a CEO, people probably laughed at my jokes and put up with all sorts of stuff. And in hindsight, I wish I knew then what I knew now. And I wish I had been humbler and listened better and made it easier for people who had different views to reach out to me. I tried to do those things when I was CEO. Marshall, you helped me and I made progress. But in hindsight, I could have done even better. Since leaving TNC and no longer being a CEO, it's a transition. So there are, bumps and some challenges. But I found it to be kind of liberating. Like, now I don't have to have the answer for everything. Maybe I didn't then either. And I can, think harder about more important things for me. I'm trying hard to learn how to be an advisor. So that's how I'm spending a lot of my time, helping companies, investment funds, and NGOs. And I have to remind myself sometimes, once I offer my advice, I have to shut up because, that was my idea. My role was to raise the idea. It's not my job in that role to be the person who decides what to do and goes and makes it happen. To be honest, I found it to be a refreshing change of pace for me. I like it.
Very, very, very good. Now, how about the environment? Oh, first, I keep forgetting something. When I kick off these shows, I'm supposed to tell people, please write any questions you have on the chat box. Please write your question on the chat box, and the fine people from Methods who are running the show are going to help us by reading the questions from the group, but I always forget to say that. So anyway, everyone listening, please write down questions right now on the nice chat box for Mark about his life, for me. Anybody you want to write down a question, just write down a question on the chat box. The New Yorker article he referenced is called The Better Boss. So if you just do a Google search, The Better Boss, put my name in it, you'll find the articles. It's a very, very funny article, by the way. Now, one other question while people are pondering their questions is, what's your outlook on the environment right now? How do you feel?
Well, thank you for asking about that, Marshall. I'm still a full-time committed environmentalist. And it's interesting. Like, where are we? Should we feel optimistic or pessimistic? It depends on what we do. So if humankind, and it's important that in the U.S. we show real leadership here. If we step up and we start doing what obviously needs to be done, I think there's reason for cautious optimism. But it depends on what we do. If we continue to sit back, sit on our hands, fight about everything, blame others for everything, and don't get on with the progress we need to make, then I would be pessimistic about the outlook. I think the COVID crisis presents an interesting opportunity to reflect on all of this. Now, of course, first and foremost, we need to address the COVID crisis. It's a humanitarian and health crisis. We've got to help vulnerable people all around the world. We've got to support the frontline heroes who are helping those vulnerable people. That's obviously job one. But some of us are on the sidelines from that. And we can think a little bit about COVID. And it's interesting. It's not the case that it wasn't known that we face this kind of pandemic crisis. It was very well known, but humankind didn't act on it. Now, it's easy to blame others, like, oh, why didn't the president or why didn't this leader do something? But, I have to admit, I wasn't really doing anything about COVID either, or pandemic crises. I hope that people then will say, well, let's not make that mistake again. Because the environmental challenges we face, especially climate change, it's just like COVID. Again, there's no longer any dispute about the science or what the downside of not addressing climate will be. We know what we need to do. It's just a question of, will we get on with it or not? And then there's one other interesting thing I think about the COVID crisis. I don't know how everybody feels, but it really saddens me when I see all this blaming and mean-spiritedness and divisiveness now arising over COVID. And of course, it's all inappropriate. We're in a mess. We've got a challenge. This is a time to come together and find common ground. And that's what I hope we can do with regard to environmental matters. Now, it's not guaranteed we will do so. Environmentalists,
Right.
I think, look, environmentalists sometimes have to criticize bad actors. I get that. There are bad actors out there and they need to be called out. But sometimes I think we environmentalists overdo that. And I think we have untapped opportunity to find common ground with people who it looks like we don't agree with them. And I'm sure it's the case. On some small things we won't. But on important things we do agree. So what I'm an advocate for is, before you blame somebody, especially if you don't even know them, get in touch with them, those people. Start with areas where you might find common ground and see if we can make progress. For the kind of environmental programs we need, they also provide jobs. They also beautify communities. They also can address risks that vulnerable communities face. So a lot of this can be thought of not even as environmental work, but just work to make the world a better place. So I'm hoping in COVID, we'll take advantage of these kinds of opportunities and once and for all make the progress that we need to make. And in that respect, I'm cautiously optimistic.
An upcoming guest next week or the week after is a friend of both of ours, Dr. Jim Kim. We both had the privilege to spend a little time with Dr. Jim, and he led kind of the anti-Ebola campaign in the United States, real expert on pandemics. And he's going to talk about, what we can do. And I think that's really important. And, one thing on a more personal note, what can you and I do is, we're kind of in the same boat, and we're going to be home for a while. It's a pretty high probability we're going to be home for a while. And, you're adjusting to a new life, and I'm adjusting to a new life. You're used to being on the road all the time. I'm used to being on the road all the time. And, for whatever reason, we're probably going to be hanging around the house for a year or so, or at least possible we might be hanging around the house for a year or so. What are some of your reflections on this? Because I think you had some very positive and good reflections on what it's been like for you to get off the road and to hang around the house and look at it for possibly a year or so.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm in transition. Marshall referenced that I might have to be at home for a while. It's because I had a little bit of a health setback, and the medicine that I need to take makes me immune system compromised. So I'm mostly recovered. I feel very good, but my doctor insists I basically live like a hermit so that I don't put myself in a position to get COVID, and I might have to do this for a very extended period. So when she first explained this to me, I have to admit it discouraged me a little bit because, my professional life was on the road and it's exciting and it gives you good ideas and it's just what I was used to. But on the other hand, if I can't do that, it kind of takes the heat off. I don't need to feel so compelled to do that, and I probably overdid it. And I can reflect
Right.
then on, well, what might I do at home? And I'm already finding it gives me opportunity to do stuff that I was otherwise unable to do. One interesting thing I'm doing is I don't want to be, again, I don't want to overdo this recluse thing. So I'm reaching out to friends, including friends I haven't been in touch with for a long time because I used to work so hard.
Right.
And so I'm calling them up or setting up Zoom calls. And I'm just telling them, hey, the one reason I'm calling you is you're a dear friend. And I feel bad that I haven't stayed in better touch with you. And that's not normally the way I used to talk to my friends. And we're having really deep and intimate conversations. Um, they're even like moving for me. And
Yeah.
a couple of months ago, I wasn't doing that. So that's one example of something positive. One other example is I always try to meditate every day. But again, in a busy life, that's an easy thing not to do. But now I say to myself, I have no excuse. I need to do my daily
Yeah.
meditation. And it's helping. So I think when life forces you to make some big changes, there's some upside. Now, having said all of that, I realize I'm enormously fortunate. Here I am in my house. I'm not sick. I'm not on the front lines of COVID. I don't mean to be
Right.
glib at all about the seriousness of this challenge.
Right.
Those are some reactions, Marshall.
And it's interesting. I've had, I think, parallel feelings, and your conversation with me was very helpful to me because it helped me. And I feel that it. I think not just you or me. A lot of us feel more thankful for the blessings we do have in life. And realize that I don't need a lot of that other stuff that seemed important at the time, and more of the simple things in life are important. And you said friends, family, people you can reach out to that maybe we didn't. Little things you can do every day, like meditate or just think about life, that maybe we didn't do as much as we could have in the past. So some blessings to look at along this with. And you said your conversation with me was very, very helpful. Now, I have a question to Brent or Justin or Sarah, whoever's online. Give us a good question from the audience.
Hello, Marshall and Mark. Good morning. It's Justin here.
Hey,
So
Justin.
you've just spent some time sharing. Hello, good morning. Spent some time sharing
Yeah.
what you both feel that the right things are to do right now, being at home, being grateful for your friends, and meditating and taking care of yourself. Brian Sidorsky, who I believe you know, Marshall, has written in and says, what can all of us do right now? What are the top 3 things that we all need to be thinking about?
Okay, Mark, you go first.
Okay, well, it's a great question. And one thing I'd like to emphasize is no matter what your circumstance, you can help the nonprofit sector. I didn't really realize this before I joined the Nature Conservancy, but nonprofit organizations are extraordinarily good and staffed with extraordinary people. I know all of the organizations in the environmental space, and I think they are all very, very good. But it doesn't matter what your area of interest is. If you have any interest in making the world a better place, even during COVID, even if you're quarantined at home, you can reach out to organizations and begin to explore now, if you haven't already done it, how you might help them. For example, in the environmental world, if we got help from financial people, engineers, politically engaged people, farmers, really any walk of life, they could help us do our work so much better. And of course, you can also financially support NGOs. All of them now will be under huge financial pressure because it's just the way the philanthropic world works. Donations tend to go down when the economy and the stock market goes down. And it would really be a shame if these really good organizations are weakened for that reason. And that you don't have to be rich. You don't have to make big donations. At the Nature Conservancy, we really valued our mom and pop small donors, as much as our big donors. So one thing I would encourage people to do is think about the areas of the world you care about, the sectors you care about, organizations you might admire, and figure out how you can support them financially and as a there'll be some constraints on volunteering during this crisis, but I think you can overcome them if you try. And again, be patient. Don't expect the organization to start doing everything and make your inquiry job one. They're busy. But I think if you demonstrate to organizations like those that you're earnest about helping, You could find it to be really rewarding experience for you immediately. I think you can make a very positive impact. And then, as I said right at the top, I think it'll be a way for you to add real meaning and value to your life.
You know, Mark, I've got to make a little call out to the person that asked that question. I know Brian, he's a wonderful human being. He is donating a lot of his life now to junior achievement and to helping people. And he has a story that's very, very parallel to yours. And so I want to thank you, Brian, for all that you're doing for the world. Here's a man who doesn't in all have to do this, but he's making a huge contribution and in many ways has led a life, Mark, that's parallel to your life. Very successful business person who's now really donating a lot of time, resources, and effort to help young people and help them through junior achievement. So Brian, great guy. Thank you for your question. And I would just say, be like Brian and be like Mark. That's two good things you can do. And the only other thing I'd add is just keep learning, like Mark said, one more time. So it's a time to think and reflect and learn that we wouldn't have taken before. That's a wonderful question. Next question, Justin.
Yes, next question comes from Amit Kapoor. And Amit writes, hello, Mark and Marshall. So a question directed to both of you. Do you believe the coronavirus will have a positive impact on the environment for a lasting duration beyond the events of COVID? And can we change for the better of mankind?
Okay, I'm going to leave this one to Mark because you know so much more than me on this topic.
Well, I think we have the opportunity, the royal we, humankind, Americans, whatever region of people you want to pick, we have the opportunity to get on a better trajectory. But I don't think it's automatic that will happen. And if you just look around, you see that some people, maybe they're frightened, nervous. I mean, obviously, a lot of people really are in harm's way because of the economic downturn, et cetera. And then there are some kind of demagogue type leaders fanning the fires of discord and polarization. That could take us the wrong way. But if we step up and instead say, let's learn from this crisis, let's pay attention to science, let's resist the urge to blame others and criticize, some criticism that will ultimately need aside for a moment. And let's see if we can show some respect for one another, including people we don't think we disagree with. Let's try to build some bridges, find common ground, and then get on better trajectories. You know, the environmental sector is the area I know best, and there's a lot of opportunity, but it's not automatic. You know, in these fiscal stimulus bills that will be happening all around the world, you can use those programs to recharge the economy, but you can also help people fix their local community, to address, inequities, including health inequities. Environmental programs would allow for all that. So query, can we step up and be bigger than we sometimes are? Can we put aside differences, work with folks with whom we used to feel, discomfort? That's, I think, our challenge and our opportunity. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I hope people on this phone, if they agree, on this call, if they agree, will in each of their own ways do the same.
I'm going to ask everybody to write one thing in the chat box. And again, I'm not going to have time to review them all right now, but I would just like to read them myself. And that's based on our conversation, either micro level, which is your own personal learning, reflection, meditation, growth, whatever, or macro level, which is Mark is talking about helping the environment, or Brian. What's one thing maybe you can do to take what has been given to us, which is a challenge, no one can deny it, is very hard for many people. What's one thing you can do to make the best of this opportunity and the best of this challenge? So finally, I'd like to say thank you so much to my great friend, Mark Tercek. Mark, you're a wonderful human being. I'm very honored to know you. Very honored to know you. Thank you so much for joining us. A person who left an incredibly successful career in business to go out and try to help the world. And just a good person, good human being, and good friend. So Mark, maybe I'll ask you to come back again sometime. It's been my honor to talk to you, and I hope our conversation has been helpful to all the nice people who are listening. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marshall. From the bottom of